Hey ASM, so good to be back with you guys today as we continue in our series. We are in week 4 of Seeing Clearly, and so I just want to welcome you guys all in. So good to have you with us today. I also just want to welcome in anybody who maybe ASM is not your student ministry, but you're choosing to check us out anyway. So glad to have you with us. But we're in part 4 of our series, Seeing Clearly. And so the point of this series was really just, getting our heart and our mindset and our focus and our perspective back to the heart of God in these, unconventional times with the coronavirus. A month ago when I started this, I'm like, what is it that I feel like they need to hear? And I really thought this was it. So we're in week 4 of that. And so just a little recap. Week 1, we talked about the story of Joseph and how he went through all those ups and downs, but at the end of the day, God had a plan for his life. And he has a plan for yours too. Then week 2, we talked about the story of Peter taking the step of faith out of the boat and how it's similar to our lives, and we've got to take a step out of faith while we're living in that plan that God has for us. Then week 3, last week, we talked about how sometimes after you take a step of faith, you kind of go through this waiting process on waiting for whatever it is to happen that's going to happen. And we call it the waiting room. Now, sometimes that it takes just being in the waiting room and knowing that we have character that needs to be molded, and we have things that we need to grow in for us to be ready for what's on the other side of that waiting room. And that leads us into this week, week 4. We're going to be talking about the jump and how we've got to take a jump or a leap of faith, if you will, when the opportunity rises for us to live out what God has called us to do. So you might be in here and you're like, Hagen, what's the difference in a step of faith and a leap of faith? That kind of sounds like the same thing. One thing that I've realized is that just in Christianity and just people that I've known in the past, they find they go through, like we talked about week 1, they're like, all right, I believe that God has a plan for my life. And then they get to like week 2 and they're like, I've taken a step of faith because I know he's got a plan. And then they get to week 3 and they get in that waiting room process where they're believing in the plan, but nothing's really happening. They're not really seeing any change. They're not feeling anything. And over time, they're finally like, well, forget this. I guess it was all just fake. And they miss out on the fact that the waiting room is producing things in them that God needs them to have for them to fulfill what he has for them on the other side. And so they never really make it to the point of the jump. They never make it to the point of whenever God finally comes into the waiting room, he's like, hey, it's your time to come on back. What I've got for you, I've seen you grow. I've been watching you grow. I've been putting things in you. I've been developing you for the last few years, and now you're ready to take part in what I have for you. But a lot of people never make it there. And so before we really get into this thing called the jump, I want to talk about just a few just small things real quick that are just good mindsets to have and remember. You see, Jesus never promised us safety, right? I mean, John 10:10 says the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So if you're living out a life for him, the enemy's attacking you. See, the life spent in pursuit of God's purpose and plan is not a life of security and safety. And a lot of times we try to live out our lives that way. A few weeks ago, I did a message called What's Your Choice? And I used the analogy of, I had a balance beam up here. And, if you watch the Olympics, you see people, they go on the balance beam and they do all these flips and these crazy stuff. And when they finally get done with their routine, they jump off of the beam and they go, like signifying like, all right, my routine is done, I'm finished. But a lot of us try to live our lives for God on the balance beam like this. Like we go through life and we're just kind of like, I'm just going to stay here on the beam where it's comfortable, and I'm not going to make any flips, I'm not going to do anything crazy, I'm not going to do anything reckless. And our time finally comes, we die, and we get up to heaven, and we come face to face with God, and we go, did you see what I did? And he's like, yeah, you lived the safest life possible. You didn't make any risks, you didn't take any chances. And that is not the life that he's called us to live. The life spent in pursuit of God is not about safety or security. But a lot of times we miss that because we're so comfortable on our balance beam of spirituality. And so let's get into the jump. What does that have to do with what we're going to talk about from here on out? Well, Matthew 4, verse 18 through 22. Today we're going to be talking about the story of Jesus finding his first disciples. So Matthew 4, verse 18 through 22. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." And at once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. And Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. You know, I was reading this story, and I'm trying to find scriptures and stuff that resemble like taking a risk and taking a jump, a leap of faith. And I come across this one, and I'm reading it, and I love how it says, Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Immediately. That word just kind of struck a chord. I'm like, why immediately? Like, if you think about it, Jesus is kind of just this random dude walking along the beach, or the lakeside, whatever. He sees these dudes, and he's like, "Hey, follow me." And they're just kind of like, "Okay." Like, how crazy is that? Like, that's just so odd, right? So I started doing some research. I'm looking at, like, why did these guys just leave everything that they knew? They left their job, they left their family to follow this one guy. It's just like, "Hey, come over here. I got something for you." Like, what? So apparently back in that culture, if a rabbi, which Jesus was, asked someone to follow them, it meant that they thought that person had potential. And so you could use that in today's culture as well, like a stockbroker, for example. If a stockbroker came to somebody and was like, "Hey, I want to turn you into a millionaire," or just something like that, they'd probably be like, "Okay," you know? And so I'm thinking, like, there had to be something about Jesus' presence. There had to be something, like, reassuring about him, right? Now, he saw them, and he knew that they had potential. These unqualified, quote-unquote, unqualified men. He knew that they could do something that he needed to be done. See, Jesus picked guys who didn't have much, but he picked guys that could give much. See, they left everything they knew to follow someone with the hope of living a better life than the one that they had when they started their journey. And if you know the Bible, you know the stories, like these disciples, they end up being some of the most powerful people of God. And we love to hear about their stories, about the trials that they went through, the stonings and putting in jail and prison. And we love using those analogies of like, these men went through this, and they went through this, and they came out on the other side, and they did this, and they did that. We love hearing those stories. Like the stories that we most love to hear and tell about are the characters who go through crazy times or who keep on in the face of adversity and uncertainty, and they don't know how things are going to turn out, but they continue on. One of my favorite movies is The Pursuit of Happiness. It's got Will Smith and his son Jaden in it. And pretty much the movie is about Will Smith's character not having much. Like, doesn't have a job, trying to take care of his son. They're sleeping in motels one night after the other. Eventually that runs out, and now they're trying to find a place in a homeless shelter to sleep. They end up sleeping in like a bathroom at a subway station one night. And so he's going through all this stuff to try to take care of his son. And he tries to get on this program and this job, this internship, where one person is going to get picked for the job. And not a lot of people give him a chance because of the way he looks. And the whole movie is about him just continuing to pursue after his dream. Pursue after something that he wants, because he wants a better life than the one he has. And if you've seen the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert, it's been out for years, but he ends up getting the job, and ends up being able to take care of his son, lives a great life. Let's take sports, for example, now. I love hearing stories about these dudes in the NFL who kind of came out of nowhere. I love hearing stories about the Atlanta Braves MLB team. Had a guy a couple of years ago named Evan Gaddis, and he was like a janitor or something, and then just, I think, showed up at a tryout, did really well, ended up doing really well for the Braves. I love hearing stories about guys who kind of went undrafted and just continue to work, continue to grind, and they ended up getting an opportunity, a tryout, or something to be seen. And they end up becoming great, great players. Let's take the Bible, for example. We love hearing these stories about these people who go through these crazy times and these crazy things. But because of their persistence, they continue on and have great lives. And so I've noticed, like, we love hearing these stories and we love seeing these stories. And we're like, man, that's so awesome for them. But when it comes time for it to be our story, we don't love it so much. Why? I think it's this thing called fear. See, fear tries to convince us that our present reality is all that there is, and that the future only holds more of what we're currently living in. So a lot of times when it comes our turn to make a significant impact on something, or to make a significant impact on someone, or to live out our purpose, or to be who God's called us to be, fear creeps in. But the good news is, when we live in faith instead of fear, faith tells us the truth. Faith tells us that God has a plan. He has things in store for us that we never could have imagined for ourselves. 1 Corinthians 2, verse 9 says, however, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love Him. God has a plan for your life. He has great things in store for you. But you've got to make the decision. You've got to make the choice to take the risk and make the jump when God opens the door from that waiting room that you've been waiting in. Whenever opportunity rises, you've got to be ready. Whitney M. Young says, it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So maybe you've been in the waiting room for a long time and you're getting kind of tired of it. But I really think the waiting room is where our character is developing. Our character is growing. Where we're being molded and shaped into the people that we need to be, for who God is going to need us to be, for what He's going to need us to accomplish when He finally comes into the waiting room and says, hey, it's your time to come back. I've got something for you right here. And I've been watching you for years. I've been seeing you grow. I've been seeing you develop. And now you're ready. So here you go. But if you choose to get up and walk out of the waiting room before that time comes, you'll never get to experience that. So as we kind of come to a close tonight, I want to tell a story about me in high school, and hopefully how this kind of paints a really good picture and relates back to this jump. So when I was in high school, there was this place about 45 minutes away from where I lived. It's called Sardine Creek, and it was a cool hangout spot for, a lot of people to just kind of go and hang out. You could go and pay $5 to get in. You could, at the beginning of the trail, you could get an inner tube down the creek to eventually you get to the place where everybody went and hung out, or you could just drive on down and just get there. And, I was probably 16, 17, 18 when I went a lot in with some buddies of mine. But I remember the first time I went, I get down to the place where everybody's kind of hanging out, and you see people coming down from the inner tubes, and, people are just kind of all over the place. And I remember the coolest thing was I would look across the creek, and there was this big cliff that people were jumping off of. And so it was like as a 16-year-old daredevil, I'm like, yo, I'm about to go do that. And so I did. I went and jumped off the cliff, but the thing was, like, it wasn't the easiest path to get up there. Like, you had to swim across the creek, you had to, now that you've been in the water, you're wet, so you're trying to climb up this hill where it's muddy because everybody else has come before you, has also been wet, and it's muddy, and so it's slippery. So you finally get to the top, and now you've got to go, like, through some woods, and you're going through briars, and you're stepping on kind of sticks and stuff, and so you're hurting your feet, and you're getting cut up. But you finally get to the top, and you're like, yo, I'm going to jump. And then I start looking down, and I start seeing, like, people who would jump, like the dirt and the sand from the jump spot, like some of it would kind of collapse here and there because it was just unsturdy. The foundation was unsturdy. And so in my mind, I'm like, I ain't always had the best luck, so I don't know if I should do this because this is going to be my luck. I'm going to go to take my jump, and the whole cliff is going to collapse, and I'm going to break every bone in my body. And so I'm just at the hill, and I'm at the top of the cliff, and I'm like, kind of concerned. Again, I was a daredevil, man. I did a bunch of stupid stuff, but I also had a little bit of sense. Well, peer pressure happens, and so all my buddies are like, yo, you gotta do it, you gotta do it. So finally I'm like, you know what, I'm doing it, whatever. If I die, I die. That's how stupid I was. And so I remember I got ready, I got back, and I got my running start, and I went, and I jumped. And obviously I'm still here today, so I lived. And it was awesome. Like the adrenaline rush that I got from it, the sense of just pure happiness of just falling in the air for 3 or 4 seconds and splashing into the waters. There's just not much else like it, especially at 16 when you're just all about the adrenaline. And so you might be like, hey, and what the heck does this story have to do with us and God? Well, let me tell you. You see, I think a lot of times our lives are a lot like that with God. We try and we go through mess, and similar to me kind of making my path up to the cliff, like I'm going up a slippery, like it's not the straightest path, I'm having to go up a slippery hill, like I'm having to work to get up there. And then I finally get up there and I have to go through woods and briars and sticks and all kind of mess, and I'm getting cut up and I'm getting hurt. That's a lot of times that's kind of what life is like with God. Again, from the beginning, it's not about safe and security. You're gonna go through mess, man. That's just the reality of life. You're gonna get hurt. You're gonna deal with pain. You're gonna deal with death. You're gonna deal with all this stuff. That's just the reality of the life that we live. And what's crazy is more often than not, you're gonna deal with that stuff whether you have God in your life or not. But it's so much better to deal with it when you do have Him in your life. I'm speaking from experience. I've dealt with it without Him, and I'm just angry all the time, and I'm ticked off, and I don't want to have anything to do with anybody. When I deal with it with Him, I know that there's goodness. I know that there's grace. I know that it's not going to last forever. I know that He has a plan for me, and even though it might not look like what that plan is now, even though I'm not feeling anything happening or anything changing, I believe wholeheartedly that He has a plan. But we've got to jump. We've got to jump into that plan when the opportunity arises. And when we choose to take that jump and trust in Him, we're met with this rush of freedom that nothing else can compare to. And so sure, you could go back to what's normal. You could get to the top of the cliff. You could get to the point of you know that He has a plan. You've taken a step of faith into that plan. You've been in the waiting room. And you get to the top of the cliff, and He's finally like, all right, here's the opportunity I've been waiting for you. And you look at it, and you're like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of scary. It's kind of risky. What if what I tell them they don't like? What if because of what I do I get picked on? I don't know. And so we choose to go back down the cliff instead of jumping. We go back to what's normal. We go back to what apparently already hasn't been working because you had this desire to go to the top of the cliff to try something different anyways. But we go back to it because of fear. You've got to jump because there's something that He has for you. There's something that He wants to do through you. And a lot of times it's in the water, under the cliff, that He's just like, hey, here you go. Go for it. You see, jumping's going to give you something that going back to normal won't. It's freedom. And the more you jump, the more you're going to want to. And the more you do it, the more you're going to be more apt to take risks and pursue challenges. Because you get to the place of like, oh, He took care of me here. Oh, He took care of me here. I know this is a little more risky, but I know He's taken care of me before, so I know and I have faith that He's going to take care of me again. Over time, when I was at that creek, the more and more I went, I got tired of just jumping off regularly, and so I got to the point where I do flips off of it, and I would die. I would want to dive into it. The water was very shallow, so you had to hit that water at a certain angle, so it was super risky, but I got tired of just doing the same old thing over and over again. Like I needed something new. I needed something more. And I knew that I could do it. So things might get more risky. But by continuing to live in freedom and trust in His plan, you'll be more empowered to make the jumps that He needs you to make, not only for yourself, but for the people around you that need to see you live it out with boldness. And to kind of just come full circle, the more you jump, the more clearly you will see Him. So remember, 4 weeks, 4 points. Week 1, stay faithful. He's got a plan. Week 2, stay trusting. You must take a step of faith to walk in that plan. Week 3, stay patient. There might be a waiting room that you're just going to have to endure for a little bit. Because there might be something that He's got to just shift in you. And there might be something that you just need to grow in just a little bit before you're ready for what's happening next. And then tonight, week 4, stay ready. Because the opportunity will rise for you to jump and live out what He's called you to. We go back to our quote from the beginning. It's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. Don't waste your time in the waiting room. Continue to live for Him. Continue to seek Him. Continue to pursue Him. Continue to let Him develop you. Continue to let Him mold you. Continue to let Him shape you. And as you continue to do all those things, you're getting ready for the time to come when He opens that door. He says, hey, come out of the waiting room. It's your time. I've got something for you. And you need to make the jump. So let's pray tonight. Father, I just thank you for this day. I thank you for these students. I thank you for each and every single person that's watching this right now. And I just pray that over this last 20 minutes or so that you've done something in them to where by now they're not the same as they were when they started. I pray that they make the decision to continue to pursue you, and to continue to follow after you, to continue to trust in you. And I pray that maybe if they're in a season of waiting right now, that you continue to develop them, that you continue to mold them, and that you continue to help them grow in the areas that they need to grow in so they can reach the people that you need them to reach. So I just thank you for all that you do. And I just pray that you continue to raise us up, and that you continue to give us opportunities out of the waiting room. And I just thank you for all that you do. I thank you for these students. I thank you for who they are, their personalities, their gifts, their talents, their abilities. And I just pray that you let them use those for your glory. So we just lift you up today. We lift you up in this place. In your mighty, powerful name we pray. Amen. 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 Hey, ASM. Again, it's so good having you guys here. I hope you guys got something out of this 4 weeks. I really do hope that the last 4 weeks have been challenging. I hope they've been eye-opening, but more than anything, I hope that from the beginning of this series to now, you're now able to realize that God does have a plan, and we've got to take steps of faith. We've got to trust, and sometimes we've got to wait, but He's got a plan for us. And the more we live that out, the more we continue to trust in Him and continue to just be persistent in Him, the more clearly we're going to continue to see Him through all of this other stuff that's going on. So I hope you enjoyed it. We've got a brand new series coming at you next week, so I'm excited for that. But hope you guys have a good rest of the day. Looking forward to getting together with you guys in the Zoom chats. But hey, until next time, see ya.